Série indienne, 10 immenses classiques pour regarder l'Inde dans les yeux.
Hello, I'm Anthony Cerulli. I'm a professor of South Asian Studies at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. I'm also the creator of the photo-ethnographic project Manuscriptistan. That title is drawn from the word manuscript and the Persian suffix stan, which means country of, place of, and therefore the project literally means something like manuscript country or place of manuscripts, and that refers to India at the moment. And in particular, 3 Indian states are what you find in the exhibits within this project. That's Kerala, Telangana, and Uttar Pradesh. And so I have taken a number of photographs over many years of manuscripts and manuscript archives in these 3 states. And from those many years of taking photographs in these places, I've distilled a number of pictures that I've been touring around in exhibits in the United States and had in some publications as well that are now starting to come out. The manuscripts that you primarily see in the photographs are palm leaf manuscripts. So they're dried palm leaves, usually cut into narrow rectangular shapes of sometimes multiple leaves, and they would be inscribed with a stylus on them, the text that would be preserved in the manuscript, sometimes on 2 sides of the palm leaves, sometimes on 1, and they would be stacked up. And what you see, something like this right here. This is a manuscript from Sri Lanka, actually. And then slightly larger than the palm leaves, which are right here in the middle, you would find what would be the equivalent of a cover, say a book cover. Slightly larger than the folios, these leaves, would be a hard piece of wood, sometimes decorated very nicely like the one you see right here, and put on either side. Holes would be bored through all of the leaves and the cover, and usually, depending on how long, if it's something like this, which is about 2 feet long, in 2 places, and strings would be put through them and wrapped around to keep it from falling open or the leaves from dispersing all over the place. If it's a shorter manuscript, say half of this, maybe only 1 hole would be bored through and a string would be put through it. I started this project while I was in graduate school working on my dissertation, which involved a lot of translations of Sanskrit text, medical texts in particular, but also some religious texts, and brought me to archives to inspect and to see certain manuscript traditions of some of the texts I was working on. When I came to those spaces initially, I was immediately captivated by them, not just the manuscript itself as an object that I thought was worthy of considering and spending time looking at and noticing some of the differences and the craftsmanship that goes into creating them, but the spaces themselves too, the way they were arranged or are arranged, and the ways in which some are very sturdily built spaces that have been around for a long time, and others are a little bit less so, a little bit more makeshift or more modern. And I wanted to be able to remember how these different spaces and these objects were organized. And what I found was that many of the places have very different organization when it comes to the way in which they house and arrange their manuscripts. Some have a lot of manuscripts and some have very few. And so they were all very different. It was something that I wanted to always have access to while I was doing my research. So I took pictures from the very beginning. Around 2015, I won a grant that allowed me to actually turn what was a side project or even a hobby into a photo-ethnographic project, and it allowed me to visit India, make visits to India specifically for the purpose of photographing archives, and with the permission of some of the people who work there to talk to and photograph the people who take care of them and maintain those spaces. Some of them are trained as archivists or as preservationists who keep these sometimes very old manuscripts in the best possible shape that they can be in. Other times there are people who are security guards or who manage the flow of people to and from them. And I wanted to have a sense for the entire ecosystem of the manuscript in a photographic form. So the exhibits that I've been doing for Manuscriptistan give both a sense of the manuscript and the archive or the manuscript library as works of art and artistic spaces or space as art, as well as the people whose livelihoods depend on the continuance of these spaces and who also ensure that those of us who are interested in the knowledge that's contained in all of these texts can have access to them and still find the things that were written in India's past are available. Another thing that impelled me to work on this project was that there has been, for many years now, a effort to digitize a lot of India's manuscripts, because the reality is that many of the manuscripts that are in these archives that I've visited, and many that I haven't visited, they're getting old and they're in states of disrepair such that they may not be readable for much longer. And so therefore digitizing them extends the longevity of the knowledge. Now, that itself is a very important endeavor, and it's already producing a lot of materials that are freely available for everybody who's interested online, and makes searching for manuscripts a lot easier, saves costs in travel and research money and all of that. They're wonderful results of this project that the government of India is sponsoring. But it also means that people who had been doing work in the archives, people like myself, scholars, but not just scholars, anybody who is interested in this material, no longer have to engage with these physical objects in the same way. That bringing you there, smelling the space, seeing the lighting of the often dimly lit or fluorescently lit spaces requires of the person visiting the archive. And so by photographing these spaces and these objects and the people who, while they're working, when they're working in these spaces, it was another way, at least in my mind, to capture that sort of experience of being there and actually being around them as objects rather than something that you just look up online and read just the words. So it was a bit of a preservationist intent as well. My hope for the Manuscriptistan project is that it will educate people about the history of writing and textual dissemination in India's history, the physicality of it, as well as the experience of being in an archive or archives in various places in India today, and what it's like to engage with these materials, what it's like to see them on the shelves when they're stacked up and organized, and what some of the people behind the scenes, quote unquote behind the scenes, are doing to keep these places active, to keep them available, keep the material that they're housing available to researchers and anybody who's interested in them. I also hope that from a visual standpoint, people who perhaps will know very little or nothing about India or India's history will just find them to be interesting photographs. The materials that go into the creation of these manuscripts themselves, very close images, for example, or a pull away telescoped image of rows and rows and rows and rows of shelves of manuscripts, itself offers a very captivating sight that perhaps will be interesting to somebody who has very little knowledge or no knowledge at all of what they're looking at, but it's something that is appealing and perhaps beautiful. So there should be something, I hope, for all people to come and visit, and perhaps to learn something or to get a physical sense of something that they might already know something about. That is, the manuscripts that they've been reading perhaps online and never in a physical form.